Welcome to Inkhaven Presents, Readings from the Archive, where I invite writers from the internet and other people to bring essays that they love or that maybe they've written, to read them and then discuss them with us. My guest today is Scott Hoffman, a little different from other guests. He is a co-founder of Folio Literary Management, that over the past few decades has represented over 500 New York Times bestsellers. He then went on to be the founder and CEO of International Literary Properties, which owns dozens of catalogs and thousands of books from people like Tennessee Williams and George Simenon. So anyway, thanks so much, Scott, for coming with us today. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
So I understand you're going to read the first chapter of The Fourth Age, Smart Robots, Conscious Computers, and the Future of Humanity, by Byron Reese.
That is correct.
Why did you choose this today?
I chose it for three reasons. One, I think it's a book that if the Inkhaven audience hasn't already read, that it would be something that they would gravitate towards. It was written 5 or 6 years ago before the AI boom came into the sort of collective consciousness, and a lot of the predictions that the author makes were quite prescient and are still a thoughtful way about thinking about some of those topics. The second is that it's one of the books that I represented. And in fact, because of the nature of the book and because there were so many technical subjects, it revealed to me that part of my job as a literary agent was in some ways to serve as a translator. Byron is a really, really brilliant guy, but he's an elliptical thinker. And so when he puts together these very large, complex thoughts, he'll start at 1 and he'll end at 100. And he'll often elide over the things in the middle because that's the way that he thinks. But it's hard to do that in a general trade book. You need to sort of lay out the steps for your lay audience. And so I did a lot of editing on that book, enough in fact that they offered me cover credit, and I said, no, that's okay. I'm an agent. I don't do that. But then I got to thinking that, you know what? Maybe it would be interesting to actually be the author of a serious nonfiction book. And so Byron and I collaborated on his next book, my first, which was a geeky pop science book about waste of all subjects.
Nice.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, I think that's a really valuable role to help certain people communicate well. I'm reminded, I believe it was, and we'll correct this if I'm mistaken, Roger Penrose's The Road to Reality, which I think spends several pages explaining fractions at the beginning of the book, and then in 2 pages differential calculus. That's a guy that doesn't quite know how to pace something for his audience.
Right.
And I can imagine Byron maybe would have some similar.
Yeah, and it's interesting. In nearly all of the careers that I've had, or nearly all the jobs I've had within my current career, there's been a large translation aspect. When starting International Literary Properties, it was effectively a finance company that acquired copyrights and cash flows from authors and playwrights. And I spent a lot of my time explaining this crazy, archaic book business to finance people, and conversely explaining finance to authors and their representatives who just don't think that way. I mean, the kind of personality that can sit in a closet for 6 months and create a brilliant nonfiction book or write an amazing novel is generally not somebody who's going to understand how to discount a cash flow or understand understand the time value of money.
Yeah. So this is the first chapter, and you worked on this with him. He'd already written, I think you said, one self-published book.
He did, yeah. It was called Infinite Progress. Did very, very well. Got some lovely quotes from some major thinkers. It really launched his speaking career. He sold, I think, certainly in the 5 figures in numbers of copies of that book. And a mutual friend introduced us. We were both living around Austin, Texas at the time. And Byron said, I was thinking about maybe pursuing traditional publishing rather than self-publishing. I think my audience is big enough. And so we started talking about the ideas. We started talking about his platform. In the publishing industry, a platform is your ability to sell copies of your book to individuals, right? Mm-hmm. A podcast could be a platform. A TV show could be a platform. An amazing blog might be a platform from which to sell books. And I concurred, and then we talked about what the ideas might be. We worked out The Fourth Age, and sold it to Simon & Schuster, and it's been a fantastic success, and so much so, in fact, that we're talking to S&S about doing a revised and expanded second edition now.
Oh, wonderful!
Yeah.
So you helped with the editing and the ideas of this book. Is that unusual, or did you do it to a greater degree with this book, or how often does that need to happen with writing?
Yeah, it's interesting. I would say that I probably did more editing on this book than I did on others. It's for most first books, whether they're novels or whether they're nonfiction books, literary agents will get more involved. Certainly if they're novels, and that comes down to a weird quirk of the publishing business. So when a publisher decides to publish a nonfiction book, they generally don't buy that book based on a full completed manuscript. They'll buy it on a book proposal, which is effectively a business plan for the book. And then the publisher will work with the author and the agent sometimes to shape the content and turn it into the finished product. But for novels, you need the full manuscript, because if anybody out there has written a novel, you know how different the final draft is from what your first draft is. And with no proof of concept, no track record, the publishers really don't want to be buying a pig in a poke. And so they want to see that completed polished manuscript. Now, the editor at a publishing house will probably still do more editing, but the agent and the author together will want to make it the best book possible to give it the greatest possible chance of publishing success.
Gotcha. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing this chapter that you helped with.
For sure.
So I think we'll turn to that now. Here's Scott reading his chapter.
The Fourth Age by Byron Reese. Chapter 1. The First Age, Language and Fire. While no one knows when isolated individual humans first harnessed the power of fire, we have pretty good evidence that around 100,000 years ago, we gained widespread mastery of it. And it's easy to see in the much more recent Greek myth of Prometheus an eons-old memory of how dramatically fire changed us. Fire was the original multifunction technology. It provided light, and because animals feared it, it also provided safety. Its portability meant that humans could migrate to colder climates and bring warmth with them. But far and away, its greatest benefit was that it let us cook food. Why was this particular use of fire so important? Cooking allowed us to vastly increase our caloric intake. Not only does cooking meat make it easier to chew, but, more importantly, it unwinds the proteins within it, allowing for better digestion. And on top of that, with fire, scores of inedible plants suddenly became food sources, since fire could break down all the indigestible cellulose and starch found in them. Fire enabled us, in effect, to outsource part of our digestive process. It's quite difficult to get the number of calories humans require today with just raw food, since so many pass through the body undigested. How did we use all the new calories we were able to consume? We used this new energy to grow our brains to unprecedented complexity. In a short period, we grew to have 3 times the number of neurons as gorillas or chimpanzees. Such a brain, however, is like an Italian supercar. It can go from 0 to 60 in the blink of an eye, but it sure burns gas doing so. Humans, in fact, use an incredibly lavish 20% of all the calories we consume just to support our advanced brains. Few other creatures use even half that much energy to power their intellects. From a survival point of view, this was a pretty bold bet. To borrow a phrase from poker, humans went all in on the brain, and it paid off, for our more powerful brains led to the creation of another new technology, language. Language was the great leap that the historian Will Durant says, quote-unquote, made us human. So fire began the great romance we still have today with technology. What is technology? Throughout this book, when I use that term, I mean the application of knowledge to an item, process, or technique. And what is technology for? Primarily for enhancing human ability. It allows us to do things we couldn't do before, or allows us to do things we could do even better. Certainly we had used simple technology before fire, over 2 million years before, in fact, but fire was different, special. It still seems a sort of magic. Even today, campers sit around the fire at night, staring into it, transfixed by its otherworldly dance. The vastly more powerful technology of language allowed us to exchange information. With it, you can encapsulate something you've learned, like tigers don't like to have their tails pulled, in a way that can efficiently travel from person to person far beyond the one-handed man who had the original experience. Additionally, language enabled us to cooperate with each other, which is one of our singular abilities as a species. Without language, a dozen people were no match for a woolly mammoth, but with language, those people could work together in a way that made them nearly invincible. Language came about because of our bigger brains, and in a virtuous cycle, language in turn grew our brains even bigger, as there are kinds of thoughts we cannot think without words. Words are symbols, after all, for ideas, and we can combine and alter those ideas in ways that are inconceivable without the technology of speech. Another gift of language is stories. Stories are central to humanity, for they gave form to human imagination, which is the first requisite for progress. Oral chants, the progenitors of today's ballads, poems, and hip-hop songs, were probably early creations of speaking humans. There's a reason that things that rhyme are more memorable than things that don't. It's the same reason that you can remember song lyrics better than a page of prose. Our brains are wired that way, and it's that fact that allowed the Iliad and the Odyssey to be preserved in oral form before the invention of writing. This also explains why the opening theme songs for TV shows like Gilligan's Island, the Beverly Hillbillies, and the Brady Bunch are forever etched into my mind, in spite of my not having seen those shows for decades. It's notable that those songs are stories themselves, even including the words story and tale in their lyrics. It's speculated that our oldest stories, like the Epic of Gilgamesh, probably existed in oral form for millennia until the invention of writing allowed for them to be jotted down. We don't know much about our earliest language other than what we can infer from languages today. The original tongue of humans is long gone, as are the many forms that came after it. We group present-day languages into families that are derived from theorized proto-languages. One such language is Proto-Indo-European, from which 445 languages today descend. These include Hindi, English, Russian, German, and Punjabi. Philologists study proto-languages by looking at similarities between words across languages. In 2013, researchers from the University of Reading in England employed this sort of analysis to find the oldest words we use. Their research found 23 ultra-conserved words that have likely sounded largely the same for 15,000 years, meaning they reach back to a proto-language that existed even before Proto-Indo-European. These most ancient of words include man, mother, 2, 3, 5, here, ashes, and worm. The oldest word of all may be mama, or something like it, given that in a variety of languages, the word for mother begins with the M sound, often the first sound a baby can make. And then, intriguingly, we have languages that seem to have no linguistic antecedents, languages that seem to have come out of nowhere. Basque, spoken by the people who inhabit the mountains between Spain and France, is one such example. It's thought by many to be a language older than the Proto-Indo-European tongue, and there's a legend among the Basques that theirs is the language that was spoken by Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. The versatility and complexity of language are amazing. English recently passed 1 million unique words, although most of us get by using only about 25,000. A new English word is coined approximately every hour, although that pace is slowing. Back in the day, someone like Shakespeare would make up 3 words before breakfast. The leading theory as to the culprit behind this recent slowdown in new words is automatic spell checkers, which simply won't put up with that kind of horseplay. And unless you want to send an email with lots of red scribbles under your so-called words, you'd better use stuff already on the approved list. During this time, the first age, the roughly 100,000 years in which we lived as hunter-gatherers with both language and fire, what was life like? The total population of humans was around 200,000, so while we weren't an endangered species, the survival of humanity was far from certain. Although there was undoubtedly a wide variation of practices, a large number of these people lived in collectivist, largely non-hierarchical societies. As recently as 1700, there were still over 50 million hunter-gatherers spread across the globe, so we have a good deal of first-hand observation about modern hunter-gatherers. Even today, the best estimates suggest that there exist more than 100 uncontacted hunter-gatherer tribes, whose members may number a total of over 10,000 people. If modern examples of hunter-gatherers are any indication of life before agriculture, we can infer that sustenance was not something one could take for granted, and that any individual was just a few days' illness away from death. As such, a general collectivism likely arose from each individual having a compelling, self-interested motive for helping others. Even the strongest members of a society would need help themselves someday. For this reason, groups that shared were more likely to be more resilient than their more selfish brethren. Besides, what was the point of accumulating wealth? There was no wealth beyond the day's haul of grubworms, and no way to store wealth, even if there were. Humans lived day to day, eking out a meager existence, just one bad winter or rogue mammoth away from an untimely demise. Modern-day followers of Rousseau have a tendency to look back on this time through the rose-colored glasses of Romanticism, hearkening back to a simpler time when humans lived in harmony with nature, uncorrupted by the trappings of the modern world. Most of us, if dropped back into that time to live out our days, would likely not conclude that these were the good old days. To begin with, times were violent. The Harvard psychologist Steven Pinker estimates that based on studies of ancient human remains, nearly 1 in 6 ancient hunter-gatherers met with a violent end at the hands of another human. Compare this with just the 1 in 30 who died such a death in the quote-unquote bloody 20th century with its 2 world wars. Thus, we can confidently say that life as an ancient hunter-gatherer was short, painful, and harsh. But this was humanity's proving ground, and with language, we embarked on the path that brought us to today.
Thanks so much for reading it. I enjoyed that. What occurred to you differently reading this out loud than when you read it first in the book as a chapter?
It's interesting. Not very much, because the way that I generally deal with editing is a very oral AURAL practice. I will read the words in my head the way that I would imagine they would be read out loud, and make sure that they flow, make sure that the cadence is right, make sure that the ideas are succinct and that one idea flows into another logically. And so, if you do your work well as an editor, a book should sound good when somebody reads aloud from it.
Nice. Yeah,
and interestingly enough, like there may or may not be any people writing fiction who are in the audience, but when it comes to dialogue, one of the biggest mistakes that authors make when they write dialogue is that they write it using words without thinking how it's going to sound. And so the masters of dialogue have a finely attuned ear for how people speak. For instance, people speak in contractions. People will say something like, "Oh, that's not the way that works." And mediocre dialogue writers will render that on the page as that is not the way that works. Mm-hmm. And it just doesn't sound like that if you're listening to somebody in the real world. And so the ability to parse writing through your ears effectively is a critical task for a good editor.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. So it seems like this book was one where Byron had already had a very successful self-published book first, mm-hmm. which gave you, I assume, a lot of confidence that a traditionally published book would go well.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a time where you got a book pitch or a book proposal and the person did not have much of a platform, but you were confident that something about the pitch was going to be a successful book at the end of it?
Sure. Most of the novels that I've represented in my career have been from folks who did not have a large platform, didn't already have a large following. But the concept of their book and the writing itself were so strong. The plotting, the characterization, the emotional impact of those books was good enough to overcome the fact that they were relatively unknown. One of my favorite books to have worked on is an extraordinary book called The Color of the Sea by a guy named John Hamamura, who unfortunately has passed away. But when I read that book, it blew me away. It was loosely based on the story of his parents. It's about a young Japanese-American man, Japanese-American woman who fall in love on the eve of World War II and are torn apart by the war. She and her family are interned in a camp in Arkansas. He gets drafted and winds up in the Pacific Theater as a translator and is instrumental in the bombing of Hiroshima, which destroys him because his family is from Hiroshima. And it's fascinating that even though John has unfortunately passed away and will probably never get and won't get to see it, we've got a ton of interest right now from film and TV production companies about turning this extraordinary story either into a feature film or a TV show.
Wow. And it's just you read the story, or you read the opening chapters?
So the way that it usually works when an agent is reviewing fiction is there'll be a query letter, right? Just a one-page letter saying, "Hi, here's who I am. Here's the book I've written. Here's what the audience is. Here's why I think it'll be interesting, and here's where it would fit on the shelf in the bookstore." And in some cases, they'll include a sample chapter or two. And it's interesting because agents and editors get such a large volume of submissions from writers who want to be published traditionally. The way that people in the industry read is that we basically read until we can stop, and then we do, and we move on to the next thing. And with John's book, I just didn't want to stop. And in fact, when I ran out of the material that he had sent, I sent him an actual postal letter. That was long enough that happened, and asked him to please send me the rest of the manuscript. He did. We did some editing on it, and then sold it and published it, and then the rest was history.
Wow. That's lovely. That's rare for a fiction story. I think it's hard to get those published.
Yeah.
How about nonfiction? I think you were telling me about a lady who wrote a book called Whip Smart who came to you with that pre-existing platform.
Yeah, Melissa Febos, I think, is probably one of the most talented modern writers. She's now teaching at the University of Iowa at the writers program there, and she writes routinely for the New York Times. I met Melissa when she was a graduate student at Sarah Lawrence. I'd gone up to give a talk, and there were maybe 30 or 40 students there, and she came up to me afterwards and said, "I've got this memoir, and I'm trying to get it published, and do you think you'd be interested?" And I said, "Well, I said maybe, probably not. I don't really represent a lot of memoir. The nonfiction I do tends to be business nonfiction or sort of like big thinky type stuff. Your story would have to be absolutely extraordinary for me to be interested." And she said, "Well, why don't you take a look and let me know?" I said, "Sure, I'm happy to. And even if I'm not the right person for it, maybe I can refer you to an agent." And I started reading, and I was immediately captivated. She could write about paint drying, and she could make it absolutely fascinating. But this book was about the time that she spent working as a student when she was going to NYU as an undergrad, working as a professional dominatrix, and also being an active heroin addict.
That's a lot to do at the same time.
Tell me about it. And the book wasn't really about either one of those subjects. It was about setting boundaries for oneself, and then having those boundaries pushed, and crossing that line, and then crossing that line, and crossing that line that you thought that you would never cross. And that's what made me really interested in it, and why I wanted to represent it. I did. After some complications in the beginning, sold it to St. Martin's Press, and it's in print. It still sells well. She still gets lovely royalty checks, and it launched an amazing career.
That's wonderful. I think this is helpful. I'm getting a sense of these. Another question I want to ask you is about bloggers who turn into authors.
Mm-hmm.
When is the right time actually, the first question is, why should a blogger want to be an author? When is it appropriate? When is it a good fit? Because, they have a place where they can write. They sometimes even have a readership. When do you think is a good fit for them to become an author of a book?
It really depends on the blogger, and it depends on the nature of their blog. For some bloggers, they probably shouldn't ever go the traditional publishing route. They're doing a fantastic job reaching nearly all the audience that they want to reach. They're monetizing their writing in a way that fairly reflects the value that they're adding without having any middlemen involved. And for, I would say, so for the vast majority of bloggers, pick any random blogger, they probably don't have a big enough audience to interest the traditional publishing world. Yeah. So let's say 99% of bloggers are either good to go just continuing in the blog format, or if they do decide to publish, self-publishing, which is a very viable way to go. In fact,
I've done that with Less Wrong. We've published a bunch of Less Wrong books.
Absolutely,
so a few thousand copies.
Well, and not only that, but the thing I love about self-publishing, and now that so many of these barriers to entry have been torn down, is that you can kind of crowdsource your acquisition work as a publisher, and you can see something that you might not have thought was going to be all that popular all of a sudden really takes off, and some publishers and certainly some agents use self-published works as kind of a farm system for signing clients that then go up to the major leagues and publish with HarperCollins or Simon & Schuster or Random House. Where it gets interesting for a blogger to do a traditionally published book, there are a couple of ways to do that. One, when they have in some way hit a barrier to growth to growth in their audience, that's due to the medium. There are only a certain number of people who read blogs. But if you take a blogger who's got 100,000 readers, 200,000, 500,000 readers, chances are that there will be a lot more people who would be interested in what that person has to say, and that person may want to read in book form. And so somebody like that can take the core audience that they've got from their blog, have that be sort of the nearly guaranteed sales that will make a publisher think that it's a safe bet, but that can expand those concentric circles of readership. Believe it or not, there are still some people who go into physical bookstores or people who go online with the intention of buying a book. They don't necessarily know what book they want to buy. And if they happen to be interested in prediction markets, and there's a blogger who's written a book about prediction markets, and it winds up on one of the tables at their local bookstore, then they might buy it and become a super fan.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. So yeah, how much? Because I imagine you have represented people who've gone from having good blogs to having good books. How often is it the case that they're reaching a different audience versus they're reaching mostly the same audience, and how much are they taking basically the content of their blog and the subject of their blog and just turning it into book form versus finding a new angle on them and their perspective on the world?
So a bunch of questions in one. The first question is, it's difficult to tell whether the audience is just selling books to their blog readers or whether it's expanding. We think that the ecosystem broadens when there are traditional books at play, but I couldn't be certain of it. It's really difficult to track who consumes traditionally published books. And so we're left to do some educated guesswork about that. One of the other things that I meant to say, too, about when a book really works for a blogger is because there are no barriers to entry in blogging. There are very often bloggers who have incredible, smart, insightful things to say, but might not have the academic credential to back it up, or might not have the gravitas that they would like to affect the change that they want in whatever area they're writing about. And there's a reason that the phrase "oh yeah, that's the person who wrote the book on the subject" exists. And so for somebody who's a blogger who's got a following and who's got some really fascinating ideas, but who doesn't have the imprimatur of a large publication or a university behind them, doing that traditionally published book and getting it reviewed in traditional media can be a big step towards broadening their audience to people who say, oh yeah, that's not just some run-of-the-mill crazy person blogging about this. This is somebody who's thoughtful and has something material to add to the debate.
Have you reached out to bloggers before and been like, I think you should write a book?
Oh sure, yeah. All the time, all the time. I think, if I recall correctly, the first, and I've been reaching out to bloggers for, I've been in the business for a little over 20 years, and for more than 20 years. I think one of the first nonfiction books I sold was the companion book to the entirely invented holiday International Talk Like a Pirate Day. And Chum Bucket and Cap'n Slappy were the two guys who invented International Talk Like a Pirate Day.
Dear Professors Chum Bucket.
Exactly. To the Honorable Chum Bucket. I reached out to them after having read some of their online writing, and we got a book that we published with Penguin. And that book had some the sales were great, and it was mostly a humor book, and it did really well. And in fact, it reminds me of one of my all time dad jokes, which is what's a pirate's favorite letter?
Mm-hmm. R.
C. You'd think, but a pirate's true love always be the sea. Yeah.
Okay.
So I've got two kids who are 7 and 5, and they groan at my jokes. So
I almost wanted to ask you to read a chapter from that.
Shiver me timbers.
Oh dear.
I did another blog to book. Heather Cox and Jessica Morgan were fashion bloggers, and they had this amazing blog where they made fun of badly dressed celebrities. That was called "Go Fug Yourself," F-U-G, because fugly was the new pretty. And we did a couple of books with Heather and Jessica that were different versions of the stuff that was on the blog. Some were blog posts that were just reprinted in print format. Some was new material for the book. But then Heather and Jessica branched out and started to write young adult fiction that appealed to the blog audience, but was not the blog content. And so I did a couple of books with them that were novels that were also quite successful.
Nice. Excellent. Well, I'll keep my mind out for anyone who is wildly successful as a blogger and be like, all right, time to.
Well, I've spoken to some of the Inkhaven writing advisors, and they are wildly successful bloggers, and we're talking about maybe doing some books together.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear it. All right. I really want to ask you about international literary properties.
Sure.
I don't know. How did you get the idea? How were you like, I know what we'll do. We will gather so many catalogs. We will bring them under one place and they will. Were you like, this is a great business opportunity? Were you like, I don't like how other people are managing these properties and we can do a better job with that?
Yeah.
How did it even start? Please tell me.
Yeah, I mean, how much time do you have? Ultimately came down to pattern recognition. Mm-hmm. There were a few patterns that I noticed. One had to do with music publishing becoming a viable investment category. In the past 5 years, Bob Dylan has sold his publishing rights, and Bruce Springsteen has sold his publishing rights, and Paul Simon has sold his publishing rights. And as I was agenting, if there's one universal truth in the book business, their authors, no matter how successful, always need money. And they're constantly calling their agents and saying, hey, Mr. Agent or Ms. Agent, what can you get for me? And for so many of these writers, the most valuable thing that they own is the copyrights on their book. And so I started looking at it from a seller's perspective. If musicians were able to sell their catalogs, I thought that authors who also receive royalties should be able to do that. And so I looked around for who was running this secondary market in literary royalties, and nobody was. And I thought that was quite curious. Another reason that I thought that the business needed to exist is because in almost every other established business on the planet, when somebody gets to the end of a long and successful career, somebody else from that industry will come in and reward them for what they've built and take care of their legacy. So if you're a doctor and you've built a medical practice in America and you decide that you want to retire, some other group of doctors will come in, buy your practice, make sure your patients are taken care of. If you're a car dealer, right, another car dealer will come in and will purchase your inventory and your physical plant. Will take over your salespeople and your customer base, and you can monetize that in your lifetime. And that just didn't exist in the book business at all. And so you had this haphazard system where in some cases agents were taking over for their authors, but that's not really an agent's job. And an agent has to be fanatically focused on selling new books and getting new books published. That often these lovely backlist books that are 4 or 5 or 10 or 20 years old languish without anybody really caring for them. Similarly, if you're an 80-year-old author, chances are you've got an 80-year-old agent who's also looking to retire. And a lot of authors wind up passing their intellectual property and their royalties down to their kids who just don't understand the publishing business anyway. They might have other careers. Some of them have done an amazing job, right? So Matt Salinger, for instance, runs the J.D. Salinger catalog, and he's an extraordinary steward of that. But he's the exception rather than the rule. And so what we wanted to do at ILP was two things. One, provide a way for these authors to get rewarded during their lifetimes for what they've built. And then two, to also manage these legacies and introduce amazing literary works to entirely new audiences, even after the author, him or herself, is gone.
And so, by and large, have you fully purchased the rights to make calls about, film or TV adaptations and all the future revenues from the things?
Yeah, every property that ILP bought, I'm no longer the CEO of ILP, although I continue to be a significant shareholder. Every deal is different. Every deal is bespoke. Every author or every heir wants something that's different. And when you step in fairly far down the line, you're constrained by what's already been done. And so there are a bunch of properties that we bought where the film and television rights had already been granted and there was no way to revert them. And so there was no way we were going to be able to do anything with those film and television rights. There was a fascinating story where we acquired the Robert Bolt catalog. Robert Bolt, amazing playwright, wrote Man for All Seasons. Wrote the screenplay for Dr. Zhivago and Lawrence of Arabia. I mean, amazingly talented guy. And his widow, who was a lovely woman who in her time had been a remarkably successful actress, was responsible for managing the estate. And with everything that's been going on in the world, we thought that the story of A Man for All Seasons would really resonate with a modern audience. And so we wondered if there was a possibility to get a remake done or to revert the rights from whichever studio had them. And so we talked to her, and she said, "Oh no, those rights are gone. Robert told me we'd never be able to get them back." And we said, "Oh, that's interesting, but can we see the contract?" And she said, "Oh, it's in a shoebox in the attic somewhere." And she lived in this amazing house in the English Midlands that was built in like 1690 or something, and you go to the house, and it's one of those houses where the doors are hobbit sized because everybody was so short back then.
Okay, yeah.
We sent an intern, and he poked around in the attic, and he found the original film contract for Men for All Seasons. And amazingly enough, it only granted the studio one feature film, no television, no remake rights, no prequel, no sequel. And so we've now got.
Had they gone on to make those things?
They made one feature film.
They just made the one.
Yeah.
Great.
They had not. Yeah, they hadn't infringed on the. They hadn't gone beyond the scope of the grant. But we're now working with one of the ILP is now working with one of the BBC Studios in-house production companies on a remake of Man for All Seasons.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it's just so interesting. I mean, I spent my whole life at the very front of the author experience where they're like, I've started a blog, I've written my first post. And I go, great, let's keep going. You're much down the end, other end of the scale here.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. I mean, when I got into the business, books to me seemed like things that just that spontaneously generated. I had no idea what it actually took to write a book, and certainly what it took to get a book published.
Yeah. I just got to ask one more on that. So how do you think about you're working with your ILP is working with the BBC on this adaptation? How does that? Do you try to just find someone you trust and then give them a lot of creative freedom? Or are you trying to be involved in that?
Again, it really depends.
Yeah.
There are some extraordinary creative filmmakers and television showrunners who do amazing things with books. So George Simenon's McGray, for instance, we've got a TV series on the air right now.
Yeah.
And in particular, so we owned ILP owned a portion of the Simenon estate, and the rest of it was owned by John Simenon, who's George's son. And John was heavily involved. He knew his father's work he knows his father's work better than anyone else. And in fact, he's the CEO of George Simenon Limited, which is the company that was formed in which ILP is a shareholder, in order to preserve the Simenon legacy. And so John was involved in every comma in the screenplays on that. There are others where we would just license a work and say, yeah, it's going to turn out the way it's going to turn out. This particular showrunner or this particular filmmaker had their vision, didn't really want any editorial input. But in general, one of the ways I think that ILP adds value is by understanding the DNA of the works in the catalogs that they own, and making sure that whatever gets done in any medium is faithful to what the author originally intended.
I think I want to go back a little bit to your work as an agent. So I understand there's been radical changes for the publishing industry with the advent of ebooks and all of the online parts of the world. What have been the big changes in the industry for an agent, or from your perspective, over the last few decades?
Yeah, it's interesting. I thought that the introduction of ebooks was going to be an event that changed the industry much more than it truly did. I got that one completely wrong. I also thought that the ebook format would see its biggest growth in areas where the consumers tend to have more disposable income, business books, serious nonfiction, that kind of thing. And I was totally wrong about that. The ebook business really saw its growth in genre, whether it was science fiction, whether it was fantasy, whether it was romance. I thought that because in the beginning of the ebook trend, you needed a bespoke or a singular device to read it. And, a Kindle at that point was $300 or $400. But as smartphones became more prevalent and Kindle reading or whatever your preferred e-reader was there all the time, and there was no incremental cost to it. People wanted to read, but the people who were heavy readers in one genre just found ebooks so much more convenient. Part of it also stems from the demise of mass market paperbacks as a format. And there are some fascinating stories about so mass market paperbacks are the ones that you would buy in an airport, the thriller size novels, as opposed to a trade paperback, which is that larger, more sort of literary feeling format.
Yeah, the mass market ones, you can really smell the glue.
Exactly. And
which I like. I've got such positive associations with that.
Well, I mean, so many of the books that I read growing up were mass market paperbacks, and authors like Stephen King and mega bestsellers, so many more of their books were read in mass market format than in hardcover, just because they were less expensive and the demand was higher. But the mass market book business was interesting in that it wasn't the mass market paperbacks weren't distributed the same way that hardcovers and trade paperbacks were. They were largely distributed by the companies that distributed magazines to drugstores, to bodegas, to corner stores. And as the magazine business started to implode, those wholesalers started to go out of business. Then what you had happen was you had this amazing round of consolidation, and every neighborhood in New York City used to have its own independent drugstore, its own independent pharmacy, and there would be a rack jobber, they called them, who would put a rack of paperbacks that would appeal to the people in that neighborhood. But when CVS bought that company, or when Walgreens bought it, or when Duane Reade bought it, all of a sudden those purchasing decisions were being made by corporate, and so you had this winner-take-all phenomenon where there was now instead of having a local author, or now instead of having somebody who was writing the kind of fiction that appealed to the ethnic group in that particular neighborhood, it was going to be John Grisham and Nora Roberts and Stephen King in every store. And so you had this winner-take-all thing where those people have done really well, but the rest of the rest of the genre, or the rest of the format has almost completely disappeared and been replaced by ebooks. I also thought that ebooks would take a much larger market share than they do right now. Ebooks as print, ebooks as words themselves, compared to digital audio, are only about 15% of the market now. And digital audio is about 15% of the market and growing strongly. And I don't think very many people saw that coming.
I think part of that is, I think most of the hardback printed books, if you go to the Kindle version, I think the price is pretty similar. It's it's not like 99 cents as you can get for some of the self-published ones. It's like $15.
Right.
Which I think then you go, well, I'd enjoy a nice physical book if I'm paying a similar price.
Well, it's interesting. The people who are digital readers tend to be digital readers. The people who are physical readers tend to be physical readers. Yep. The people who are hardcover buyers tend to be hardcover buyers. The people who are paperback buyers tend to be paperback buyers. And there's not a lot of overlap.
Interesting.
Library readers are generally library readers. They are not, in a lot of cases, book buyers. There are some who may, but by and large, the Venn diagrams do not overlap in most of those areas, and that's one of the reasons why the business, the book business in general, hasn't really been afraid of libraries. You think, oh well, you've got these institutions that are giving away this product for free, but in reality, there are library readers who are great evangelists for so many books, and they tell their friends who are book buyers about it, and you've got this interesting equilibrium.
Yeah, it is surprising how these things can sometimes be synergistic. I have a similar experience with sometimes people make so we make the web forum Less Wrong, and we make all the software for that, and it's open source.
Right.
So other people make other web forums in neighboring subjects. And I think sometimes people go, oh, that'll probably take away your readership or something. And I go, I think it mostly just adds a bit to it. There's more excitement about it. It's a slightly different crowd.
It's incredible. It's incredible. I'm in rooms where I'm talking to people who are aspiring writers, and so many of them are paranoid about having their works stolen, about having this amazing idea and then and having it pirated and published without them getting any credit and without them making any money on it. And that just rarely, if ever, happens. You should be lucky that somebody wants to pirate your work. For the vast majority of authors, their biggest problem isn't piracy; it's obscurity.
Yeah.
There's an author called Cory Doctorow who writes kind of speculative fiction.
Yes.
And
he recently commented on Less Wrong for the first time.
Oh, really? That's awesome. Okay. Yeah, I could see. I could see his worldview and the Less Wrong worldview being worlds that are pretty close. Yeah. But Cory Doctorow went to his publisher and said, "Hey, I would love to keep publishing with you, but I also want to make the books available in electronic form on my website for free so everybody can read them." And his publisher said, "You're nuts. That's how we make our money, is by selling books. If you give them away for free, we won't make any money." And Cory said, "Well, one, I think you're wrong, but two, I don't really need you because I can post them on my website for free anyway." And his publisher, to their credit, said, well, okay, let's try the experiment. And in fact, the way that I found Cory Doctorow was by reading the EPUB version of Little Brother that I downloaded from his website. And I was reading it on my phone, or actually, no, it was a PDF that I downloaded from his website. And I got about 3 or 4 chapters in, and I just didn't like the experience, and I didn't like the size of the type. So I went on to my preferred electronic bookstore, and I bought a copy.
Yeah. Yeah, PDFs are often not the perfect.
They are not good mobile format.
You're like, I love the margins. I'm just going to try and zoom in with my fingers, and then I'm going to try and...
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay, so would you say that the ebook introduction has been the biggest change to your industry of agency over the last 2 or so decades?
No, I would say that probably the biggest change is the consolidation among traditional publishers.
Oh.
When I started in the business, there were 20 or 30 publishers, including a lot of independent publishers. And when you were submitting a book to try to get it published, there were a lot more places where you could buy it. And then slowly the big 5 or 4 wound up eating the world, right? And now you've got Bertelsmann, which is Random House, is one of them. You've got Hachette, you've got HarperCollins, you've got Simon & Schuster, and you've got Macmillan. And those large conglomerates have started to absorb those smaller independent publishers. There was an initial wave of that happening maybe 70 years ago or so when hardcover publishing houses started to buy softcover publishing houses. Back in the beginning of trade publishing in America, hardcover publishers would just publish hardcovers, and then they would license those softcover rights to another publisher. They realized quite quickly that, we talked about Stephen King selling more in mass market paperback, and they realized how much money the mass market or the paperback publishers were making, and said, well, why aren't we doing this ourselves? And they wound up acquiring these softcover publishing houses. So that consolidation was a big change in the business.
I don't have a good sense of it. Obviously, you won't know the numbers off the top of your head, but if I walk into a large bookstore, like, I don't know, Barnes & Noble or something, I don't have... my vague guess is that most books are published, or a lot of, no single bookstore owns more than a few percent of publishes more than a few percent of the books. But perhaps I'm wrong about that.
I would say that the big 5 publishers probably have published more than 80% of the titles in any given bookstore.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. And it was, I assume, less than 50% like a decade or 2 ago.
Yeah, that's right. That's
interesting. And so that's just changed who you go to and what you're like. Instead of being the 50 options, it's like
exactly. And there were when you've got multiple publishers interested in publishing a book, obviously only one of them can really effectively do it. And so as an agent, we often hold auctions for the intellectual property. And there's a big difference between an auction that's got 8 bidders in it and an auction that's got 2 bidders in
it. Yeah. And that must change. It must change the importance of your relationships with the people at those places.
Yeah,
I imagine you take them out to dinner more.
So this is something that absolutely fascinated me. The interplay between literary agents and publishing houses is different than it is in most other businesses. The first time I ever went out to lunch with an editor, I was a baby agent. I was probably 28 years old. And I reached for my wallet to pick up the tab, and the editor said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, I'm picking up the tab." He said, "No. When editors and agents go out to lunch, the editor always I've got an expense account for this." And I think it was a HarperCollins editor, and I said, "Yeah." I think he said, "Yeah." He said, "I'm always happy for Rupert to pay for lunch." And that was an aha moment for me, because it's the only business I'm aware of where when a buyer and a seller go out for a meal, the buyer picks up the tab. Mm-hmm. And that's largely because agents do a lot of editors' job for them. They go through more manuscripts than the publishing houses could ever manage on their own, and they serve as, in some ways, a screen for quality. And so the publishers don't have to have that overhead in-house to do that.
Gosh, yeah, they must appreciate that. I do the front lines of Less Wrong every day. Where
you got right, exactly. You're like, oh my gosh.
And there's such great stuff, and there is such not great stuff.
And they get it effectively, quote unquote, for free, because the agents take a percentage of what the author makes, and so the publisher doesn't really. At least it's not on the publisher's P&L.
Yeah. Just on the top of my head, maybe there's not much here, but have language models started to enter your world at all? Are they changing any of the writing you're getting? Are you having to put everything through a pangram check to check the LLM writing of the...
Well, it was interesting. I had one client who got accused of plagiarizing, and
in a published book.
yes, yeah, in a published book, and some rabble rouser decided to run it through one of those online plagiarism checkers, and it came back as having a high likelihood of being plagiarized, and it turned out that the author had not stolen from other people. The author had used a lot of what they'd written on their blog as text in the book, and was attributed as such. But so a lot of it was attributed, and a lot of it was just, the author wrote it. The author can sell it in whatever format they want to.
Yeah.
And so it was not in fact plagiarized, but it showed up that way. I haven't really seen...
Just because the plagiarism checked whether it was on the internet, and
Yes.
they're like, well, it's on your blog.
Exactly.
Oh, I see.
Exactly.
That seems fine.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, there were enough other places where other blogs had quoted this author, and that text appeared verbatim.
That's funny.
That it tripped the tripwires. There are some publishers now, some small publishers who mostly go direct to Kindle or direct print on demand, who heavily use AI, and people don't know that it's AI who's writing this stuff, curated by a human, edited by a human, perhaps plotted by a human, but they're doing quite well. In the traditional world, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm sure that there are people who are using LLMs to definitely do their research, maybe to do some of the workaday prose creation.
But it's not an active problem that you're having to deal with people.
No,
saying,
not yet.
Good. Well, when it does, call me. I can give you some tips.
What's interesting about AI is that it makes some things possible for less popular works. So there are a lot of works, for instance, that don't get translated into other languages.
Yeah.
There's no demand in the Russian language, and so you can't afford to pay somebody $3,000 or $4,000 to translate into Russian. But if the LLM can do it at 99% of the quality of a human, you then have you've got that Chris Anderson long tail thing, where books that had zero economic value now have non-zero economic value.
Yeah.
The same thing applies to audio, right? You and I were talking about audiobooks before the podcast, and in order for most books, they hire a human narrator, and they pay that person a few $1,000s. It takes 7 or 8 hours to record, and so only the top fraction of a percent of the 3 million books that are published each year get released in audio format. But now when you can have an AI create a realistic voice, every book can be consumed in audio format.
Yeah, that will be interesting. We will definitely be moving more in that direction.
Yeah.
And if it's not now, then N months later, it will be
exactly.
ubiquitous.
Where N is a relatively small number.
You've spent your whole career working with writers in lots of different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes reading, sometimes giving feedback, sometimes editing, sometimes so on. Now you've come to Inkhaven.
Yeah.
Which I'd love having you here.
Yeah.
Has anything surprised you about these writers? Has anything been different than you expected?
There's a lot of writing talent here. I was very favorably impressed by the quality of writing that makes it onto their actual blogs, given that they've got a requirement to post 500 words or more every day. Mm-hmm. I would have thought that the quality of the post would be significantly lower than it truly is. But not only are people doing really fascinating thinking here, but they're articulating those thoughts extremely well. And I think that's a credit to to what you've set up as this environment that fosters the discussion, that fosters the debate, that affords them access to writing instructors and people who can coach them along, and to bloggers who've been doing this and who are remarkably successful at it. I think we all think that the world is a better place when there are more ideas out there, when there are better ideas out there, and when those ideas are stated more plainly and more clearly. Yeah. And I think that Inkhaven is succeeding massively in advancing that goal.
Oh, thanks very much.
Yeah.
You admirably. Not only I invited you out here to give people input on what things they should write about and what the industry looks like and so forth. And you were I will also publish every day. And I was like, amazing. That was not required, and you did.
Yeah, it was interesting when my first kid was on the way. I was required to be at home. I usually travel a lot for business, but our obstetrician told us that the baby could come any time in the next month, and so I didn't want to go very far from where my wife and my son were, and so I started writing a blog. At that point, that was just kind of it was a lark. I was
Is this
living
your wine blog?
Yeah, this is the wine blog. It's weirdwine.com. I was living in Austin at the time, and the slogan of Austin is "Keep Austin Weird."
Oh, yeah.
And I tend to have a fondness for wines and spirits and cocktails and restaurants that are off the beaten path. So I started this blog called Weird Wine, and I blogged pretty consistently. Then the baby came and life changed, and I would write a post now and again. And I was really thinking about at this stage in my career doing some more writing, and I think I was reading Marginal Revolution, Tyler Cowen's blog, and I saw the advertisement for Inkhaven. So I went to the webpage and I said, I'm at a point where I could spend a significant amount of time at an event like this. And I actually considered applying as a resident. And then I got to the bottom of the page and said, and yeah, by the way, if you're a publishing professional or you're experienced in the business of writing, drop us a line. And so I said, okay, this is the perfect fit. And I reached out to you, and here we are.
Yeah, I was. It's so lovely as an experience to kind of plant a flag in the ground for great writing on the internet.
Yeah.
And then my mind's blanking. But each time someone has filled it out, who I had no. Oh yeah. I can't sadly say who they are because they were with an institution that needs to give them permission. But a wonderful person came last time, did some great sessions, gave some great advice. Who I had no relationship with you, and again, I had no relationship with you. I was like, I'm just going to chat with this cool literary agent from New York. All right, we'll do it.
And let's be fair. I mean, there's some blog posts that come from Inkhaven, certainly from other places, that are absolutely ludicrous and are bad shit.
Yeah.
But that's great, right? Because it forces people to articulate what it is about those ideas that are more wrong.
Yeah.
Right? And if the goal is for people to be less wrong, you need something to compare to.
Yeah, you're going to have to keep trying, keep working, keep figuring it out.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm so glad you came to Bodega Bay so that you could put on the excellent poker tournament.
That was fun. Yeah.
You're like, I've obtained poker chips. We're going to have a poker tournament. And then is it 27 buy-ins?
I think so. I think the 28. We wound up with a $560 prize pool to distribute.
Yep. And then somehow, heaven knows, given that I was fairly inebriated, I managed to come first. I don't play poker very much, but that was very fun.
And it wasn't fixed. I promise it wasn't fixed.
Everyone was like, really? Did you just fly him out here so that you could win $280? Like, no, it wasn't difficult. Anyway, I since then, for the Lighthaven Library, picked up 2 lovely folio editions. This is of the Master and Margarita.
Oh, beautiful, yeah.
With tons of great illustrations.
Really fun.
Yes. I read this as a teenager. It was crazy.
Woland. One of my college roommates used Woland as his username in online games. That's how geeky we all were.
And then also some Lovecraft stories.
Very nice.
So
Call of
these
Cthulhu, yeah.
The purple thing there. So these will be in the Lighthaven Library, which is what I spent the winnings on.
You asked if I was surprised by anything else at the people at Inkhaven, and there's a remarkable diversity of age, of background, of professional accomplishment. I mean, there are people here who have had successful startup exits and, are wealthy beyond what most Americans would even think of. And there are, 22-year-old kids who...
19-year-old kids.
19-year-old kids who are living in their parents' basements and maybe working as baristas in some places. And those people come together as equals and really listen to each other's ideas and give each other suggestions. And it's like what I'd wished my undergraduate experience would be like. It's a place where ideas are celebrated, and there's a culture of curiosity that's unique in my experience.
Wonderful. Well, anyway, once again, I've said it before, but thanks so much for coming. It's wonderful to get connections to professionals in this whole world. It's been really fun having you. I think this is your last day. You're heading out.
It's sadly my last day. Yeah, I've got to go do some stuff with my kids, but I would have loved to have stayed for the whole thing.
You've started your so far 2 posts into your fictional series about a curious prediction markets universe.
I am. Yeah, it's
Do you think
a
you'll keep that going?
I will. I will. It's a short story called The Cohort that imagines what would happen if one day prediction markets allowed betting on individuals' mortality. 999 random people are named in this cohort, and then there's one high-profile commercial celebrity who is also named, and it deals with people in different walks of life and how the prediction market impacts them or doesn't, how it changes incentives, how people exploit it, and hopefully create some interesting characters who have some moral dilemmas that will be that'll be fun to read about.
Yeah, I'm excited for the rest of it. It's funny how people do more fiction here than they expected. Most of your posts, I don't know if you've written fiction before, even though it was very skillfully done.
I have. I've got a novel in a drawer that probably should stay in a drawer. But the nice
Does
thing
every agent have a novel in a drawer?
Many do. Many do. And many agents have published novels. In fact, one of my colleagues at Folio is a quite successful middle grade novelist, a guy named John Cusick.
I should clarify that the Folio that produced these books is not the same.
Different Folio, yeah. Different.
It's a good name.
It is. A good literary name.
Yeah.
Our original, we originally considered naming. Well, my business partner, my co-founder, and I were in the car and we were trying to come up with a name, and we were having a very hard time brainstorming. So we decided to do a counterfactual and say, okay, what's the worst possible name for a literary agency, and we came up with the Mustache Agency. That
sounds great.
it's like shades of old timey villains twirling their
mustaches. Call the Mustache Man.
Right. And then I said, you know what? We really should probably do something literary. And I was thinking Shakespeare, and I was thinking the first Folio, and I'm like, okay, this hasn't been used, so let's do it.
Yeah. That's great. And so you'll head out.
The fiction thing though. Writing good nonfiction requires a lot of research and a lot of fact checking.
Yeah.
And writing good fiction, at least good short fiction, your source can solely be your imagination and your experience. So I think that's one of the reasons why more people are indexing heavier on fiction here than they might otherwise.
It's funny that you say that, because I think that's somewhat true for some of them, but I think some of the people who came in intending to write fiction actually found that they had a harder time with the fiction they wanted to do in a day. Again, the people, they do the occasional effort posts where it's like a 3-day piece.
Right.
And whether it's an analysis or a research piece or a story, those you can't do those every day. They take a couple days. But yeah, some of the fiction pieces.
One of the other things I think is that I think that a lot of the people who came here were so locked into the nonfiction paradigm and the blog paradigm that they had somehow forgotten or overlooked how effective fiction can be as a medium for transmitting new thoughts. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you look at Heinlein, or if you look at Ayn Rand, or Frank Herbert, or other SF and fantasy writers, a lot of Philip K. Dick, a lot of what is now reality in our world was envisioned by Jules Verne back in the 19th century.
Yeah, man, I loved reading Heinlein. It's one of those books where there's a page of physics calculations about things between the moon and the earth.
Yeah.
And had the calculations gone a different way, the plot would have gone a different way.
Yeah.
It actually mattered to the
moon is a harsh mistress with gravity weapons.
Yeah. So it's very close to my heart as a lesson.
Yep.
All right, we should wrap up. But
thanks.
It was lovely chatting.
This is awesome.
If I don't know whether you're at the stage where you look for more book proposals.
I always if I take on very few new clients, but we've got close to 30 active agents, and so check out our webpage at foliolit.com, or if you want to email me directly, scott@foliolit.com. Pretty
Wonderful.
easy.
And if I'm a wildly successful author and want to sell you my catalog, I can also reach out.
You will, and I will gladly refer you to my colleagues at ILP, and they are the best in the business.
Great. All right. Well, thanks so much.
Thanks.
And,
really appreciate it.
Thank you. Before we wrap up, I'd just like to thank our sponsor for this episode, WordPress.com. As a teenager, many of the blogs I grew up reading were built using WordPress, such as Slate Star Codex, Don't Worry About the Vase, and Shtetl Optimized. The co-founder of WordPress, Matt Mullenweg, went on to build WordPress.com, a hosting service that supports bloggers. It provides an interface that allows you to design your website and to use the near infinite family of libraries and plugins that have been built for WordPress. If you're someone who cares to be able to design your own blog for your ideas, for your writing, and for your own aesthetic, then by far one of the best options on the internet today is WordPress.com.